Howdy, howdy, howdy. There we go. Welcome, everyone. We're getting going here. Let's see here. Hope everyone's doing well and ready for forgot to mute my own channel. Not you, don't do that. There we go. Happy Friday, and hope you're doing well and ready for New Year's. Hope you guys had great holidays. And yeah. And by the way, if you don't have plans for New Year's, we're going to be hanging out here at least from 7 to 10 Central Standard Time. That's midnight up to midnight for Isaiah's. So it should be fun. You can join. We'll be live streaming, or for $7 you can join the Zoom meeting. So to start off, who's got some fun plans for New Year's besides hanging out with us? Or do you have something with AutoHotkey you need help on? Obviously, that's fine too. Really? Billy? Say this is coming in. We got Hubert, Anthony.
Hey, everybody.
TN. Hey.
Isn't that Top Nation? TN.
It's a good guess. I don't know.
How's everybody doing? Everybody okay?
They're stunned into silence. It's quiet.
Well, if you keep them muted.
Better than we deserve.
Of course, my dog wants to chime in.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome to almost the last Friday of the year, right?
It
Isn't
is. We're there.
Yeah. There we go.
Has anyone got any questions or anything they're working on?
Let's see.
Isaiah, let's talk through just the fun little things we were discovering with our code this morning of like scintilla control of just, it's just a, it's funny that it does come up, right?
It is a very common thing. I think we usually talk about questioning your assumptions, isn't it? Because a lot of times we code based on what we know, and sometimes what you know is wrong.
Right.
and you're sure about it. Like I'm really sure about what happened. So the context here was that I think last week or the week prior, we were talking about a very specific issue with sending emails with UTF-8 characters. So what happens is that we were trying to describe it, but when we were trying to show it, like it didn't work out as we expected, as we wanted, and we stopped the showing that in that moment. So let me go ahead and open the code and just show what we did in the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you don't actually, to me, you have to even show the stuff. It's more about just the general concept, right? Of we were having this really weird bug that neither of us could explain. It was just like, I don't understand what's going on. And so we finally started baby step throughing it. I'm like, what about this? What about this? It's like, oh no, I fixed that. I'm like, well, let's go look.
And that's the thing. So what I wanted to show is this little line right here. And still I open it again. You see the CP0 here? For anybody who does not know what that means, and actually when you're using the string put or string get command, this CP0 tells what code page or what whether you're going to be ANSI or UTF-8 or any other code page, which what is called. And usually the string put and string get commands, you can specify that by using a CP number, which for UTF-8 would be 65001, I think it is.
Yeah.
But if you use the code page 0, what it does is that it loads ANSI characters. And that was basically the issue. We were actually trying to send an email. Everything was looking fine. Like you could get everything to work fine, except when the email was being sent. And the reason for that is that the library that I was using is using CP0 as the code page, which is ANSI, and we were trying to send UTF-8 characters. Now, the assumption here is that I had fixed that a long time ago. I fixed this. Actually, John Lalonde, the person who created QAP, was mentioning that to me in one of our calls a while back. And I said, oh yeah, I know what it is. Let me go ahead and fix it. I fixed it. In my mind, my knowledge, I fixed it. In our tool, it was not working. And then I said, but I fixed that. The problem is I made a copy of the library and put it in our tool. And that's the thing. I fixed the original code, but not the copy. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, especially when you're copying things around, that whenever you make a fix or something, very likely all your other copies don't have that fix as well. So yeah, keep that in mind whenever you're coding.
Which is also just a good thing to emphasize as well, is why you have leverage your libraries, put them somewhere and don't pull them into your examples unless you really have to, right? Like it's when things like this happen where you're like, yeah, I know I did this, and then you go back but even when we were looking at it, we were stepping through it, we're like, in the ActiveX viewer it was looking weird, but I'm like, okay, copy it from there. Okay, it doesn't work. Then I said copy it from after you get it from the scintilla control and then shove it in, and that was where it was finally an aha of like, but it was funny because it was like, it made no sense of why they would be there, but We finally
Right.
figured it out, but it was
Now, here's the other part. Whenever you're troubleshooting, I think the first step in troubleshooting would be telling yourself, it doesn't matter what I know, I have to do the baby steps anyways, even if it is stupid, even if it is not logical, even if you know that that's what is supposed to happen, just go ahead and do it anyways,
Yeah.
just in case, because and it happens to anybody. Like, I have been coding for a long time, and still when Joe tells me just copy that to the clipboard, I'm like, I know that it's gonna have it, let me try it, and then aha, there you go. Like that's exactly where it's failing.
it was funny because Isaiah, I remember you said almost exactly this. You said that was unexpected. I'm like, oh, thank God. Right? Like finally something was unexpected because
Actually, yeah, that's another
okay,
thing.
now we have a clue.
It's a very good thing that you brought that up, because when you're troubleshooting, you should be happy to find something unexpected.
Right.
When you're running the code, you don't want to get anything unexpected. You want everything to happen as you're expecting. But when you're troubleshooting, is the opposite. You want unexpected things to happen, because usually those are the clues that you need to fix the problem in the first place. So it is a very good point to keep in mind in the fact that, yeah, troubleshooting unexpected things, good. That's a good thing to happen to you while you're troubleshooting. I see a few people here in the YouTube channel, right? Like there's a few people watching, but I don't know if anybody has any specific questions that you would like answered. And here in the Zoom meeting, I don't have
Or just want an example of something.
Yeah.
We've still been going crazy with Chat GPT 3. It's which is one of the other ones I was telling Isaiah the other day. I said, you know what we need to do? Because I'm hoping everybody here has heard of the bobblehead, debugging method where you talk to your bobblehead doll, right? Or rubber ducky is another.
The rubber ducky is more well known. Yeah.
And I'm like, we need to make a stuffed animal that's the Chat GPT 3 and realize, hey, why don't I just ask Chat GPT 3? Because it actually solves a lot of problems for you, or can point you in the right direction. And it's kind of wild.
That's for sure. I think at some point we're gonna most of the time just run things by Chat GPT just to see if you're missing something that you're not thinking about or something.
Once unless someone has something, we can pull it up. But like I said, I'm happy to help someone. But I was gonna say is this: once you pull it up and do one that I had it over the last weekend. I had it write a Chrome extension for me, and it did it. It did it for me. The one I was gonna say for us is ask it. So share your screen and then ask it to like click a button in Excel using the UIA automation technology, right?
Okay.
And it didn't. What I wish we could do is provide libraries and tell us to use this specific library, but we're not quite there yet. It'll be there at some point. But it was using DLL calls and everything, and I was trying to do it from scratch, and I'm like, I think it's kind of close. And this is where it also is it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Like the better you can be specific in what you ask it, the better it will give you the solution you're looking for.
Yep. Okay. That's a weird thing right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait for that thing to exist. That's hilarious.
Now, look at this. And this is the part you have to kind of like parse out what is going on. This one in particular is not correct.
Right.
Because there, as far as I understand, there is no COM object that you can just like that, right? Hey, at some point, the UI automation might create or register a COM object, because, we can do that, right?
Sure.
But for now, it is not like that. But the other parts of this is actually interestingly close to what you need. You get the root element, then you're going to have to find the first. But here is the part that this tree scope descendants, this is a number. So this is something that you would have to configure before you use it. And then you create a condition, the automation ID would be button 1, and then you click on it. Most of it, even though I cannot use this code, but I know what he was trying to do, and I could just convert it into actually something that is working. But yeah, again, it is amazing that he can come up with this kind of things on the fly. I just hit enter and right away just had an example for me.
So
I could go ahead and try it.
and I saw Ryan join the YouTube stream. So hey, Ryan. And then Automation Man said he loves the show. I'm really interested in the UI automation and IU automation, specifically how to navigate the tree walker into child and sibling elements.
Woo, yeah, that's a very
Yeah, so are we. Yeah.
No,
We
no, no.
actually-
I do think the concept is interesting, but that is, you're getting into the weeds of UIA. That's the part that is really complex about it. And not only that, how to merge the UIA element to the tree walker as this thing is trying to do, like the tree scope and getting all the descendants and all the things. Just think about them as two separate entities. A tree walker is one object, and the UIA interface is another object. Now, the UIA interface can use the tree walker for some of the purposes. Now, I usually avoid using the tree walker because most of the times, just by using find first or find first by is enough to get the element that I want. But in your case, sometimes you want to get an element and then get all the child or all the sibling elements. And that's where a tree walker comes really handy, because I don't want to just click this checkbox. I want to click all the checkbox in this list. I don't want to find them one by one. I use a tree walker to click the first one and then get the next sibling and click it as well and get the next sibling until it finishes. That's the idea between them, but those are two separate entities, and it would require a lot of explanation to get it right, because even when I try it, it is not as easy to get it running as I want. It's not that simple.
He was just saying he hasn't seen anything. I know with Descolado, we did a video where we used the tree walker, right?
Yeah,
we
did
to it and stuff, but it was
again, it's not a hard concept. It's just that it is very broad. It has a lot of information packed.
Pull open the discovery tools just so people who haven't seen it, is that something we can at least just look at, even if we don't dive deep into it, but just to
the inspection tools, you mean?
Yeah, well, wherever the tree walker is, because that's one that Descolada had, right? Am I right in that? That's not in the normal, the one that we use, the not inspect, but the Microsoft inspection tool.
Let me verify that real quick. So let me we have just 1 second. I thought let me go this way. Animation, tree viewer, tree inspector. Yep, I think I got it. So this is let me open the folder. There is an UI automation library updated by Descolada, and it has two little tools. You have the UIA viewer and the UIA tree inspector. Either or, like both of them, you could, for example, the tree inspector, you could click on an element, and you will notice that here on the left, I have a tree view of all the elements and actually the hierarchy of them. Now, this hierarchy, I don't think you can see it if you just use the UIA viewer, in which if you start capturing and you get one of them. Oh yeah, so he actually implemented it on the other one as well. So
okay.
he did kind of like merge the two together. I think there is still a difference as how this works. The UIA viewer gets whatever is under your mouse. This one starts with a list. It starts of a list of programs, visible programs, that you could remove that option and gives you that. And it gives not only this part, but also you can choose from a list. That's basically the main difference. But to get this list of items as he is, I think, and I would be surprised if it was not like that, that he's using a tree, the tree walker. So let me see something. Let me see if it is. There we go. So we have a UIA tree walker. So let's go ahead and get this thing. Also, that's the only one that I used. And UIA true condition, UIA tree viewer, and this tree walker here.
Automation Man mentioned UI Spy and UIA Mapper tools. Who are those from? Do you know? Or Automation Man, you want to chime in there?
I haven't used it actually.
Like, are those actually Microsoft, or someone else's tools, or are those something from AutoHotkey?
I couldn't say. But basically, this is the part that I was referring to. He uses the create tree walker with a condition, right? But the condition here, because that's another thing, you could use before you create a tree walker, you have to get a condition of how you're going to create the tree walker, which is complex enough. That is I think the most complex part of creating a tree walker is creating the condition, because how it works is that you have a create, the conditions here are and, or not, I think. So you have a few different here, create or condition, create and condition, create not. And you have to create the condition first. And after you have the condition, then you create a tree walker with that particular condition on. And after you get that, then you could navigate this tree walker, which he's using it as a TW, but he's doing something else with it. But in general, the concept of a tree walker is separate from the interface, and that's what makes it a little bit complex. But I think the most complex part is creating the conditions for a tree walker. That's what usually takes more time for me, to create the correct condition for the tree walker to return what I'm expecting. It's not as simple as, hey, just look for this window and that's it. It's not exactly like that.
Well, he said that the two tools you mentioned were from Microsoft, and he thinks they're deprecated.
Very likely.
He was playing with Notepad and Excel. That's what I was going to say, which hopefully you know this. Excel has a COM object, and that's what I would be using if you're doing anything in Excel. It's so much simpler,
definitely
more reliable. But for learning, that's perfectly fine, right? It's I know Ryan did one with UIA with PowerPoint, if I remember right, isn't it? PowerPoint, isn't it?
Yeah, it was with PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Now,
and when I asked him why did he use UIA when he had PowerPoint, he said it was because the other stuff he had done was with UIA, and he just wanted to keep it all in one.
Yeah. So, but that's the other thing. Sometimes grabbing older tools and trying older methods gives you also a very good understanding of how the new methods work, because usually they build upon that. They build upon older methods. It's very rare that you get a tool that is completely new, that has nothing to do with the older versions. For example, UIA is based also of the MSAA, which is the accessibility viewer, the ACC viewer. So UIA, even though it's a new tool, is built upon the concept that the older version was created on. So they have some similarities that if you understand one, you will understand the other one.
And I see he said, that they were using it just for learning in Excel. But the other thing I just argue, which just remember, even though the UIA is much closer to an API approach because you're programmatically doing stuff, it from talking to Tank as well, like it can be buggy, but also it's not nearly as fast as COM and as reliable. And you can only automate what a human can do, right? So
Clicking,
yeah,
right click, move, those kind of things. There are other things that COM object could do that are definitely not related to whether you can click or not. So,
and again, I'm not knocking you doing it for learning, right? Like I think it's awesome because there's definitely something to say to have an appeal of like, well, I learned this one approach and I can use it in almost any program, right? Because there's a ton of programs that don't have COM, right? But they have like controls you can click. Well, still, if you have this UIA and you can use it in everything, it's definitely something great to learn. But the other one is for people who are new to programming, UIA is just really, you're going to be really scratching your head a lot.
what I was gonna say, like, I would just make a suggestion. If you want to learn UIA automation, don't start with programs like Excel or any Microsoft big program. Not only they're complex, they are unique. Whatever they do in their program is very specialized, and whatever you learn is most likely just gonna work on that program. As soon as you go to another program, it's not gonna work like that. So I would start with things like Calculator, Notepad, then go ahead and open other older programs that use Windows 32 GUIs, and then move to the newer ones, which are like Spotify and I think they're Zoom, for example. Those are programs that are built with Edge. They're not actual programs. They're built with a web interview. If you move in that direction, like starting from older programs, learning the basics, and then move to the web-based applications, you will get a lot of good knowledge that then you can translate it into something like Excel or other programs that are more complex.
The other thing I'll add on top of that is, and we discovered this or talked about it the other day with Alan Isaias when we were talking about ACL. Not all programs are built with the UIA at the same level. Like they'll have some basic stuff, but programs like Excel will have automation IDs, or whatever. They've paid more to have people go back and make sure they're tightened up really well. But like even like with Studio, for instance, Maestria didn't build all the automation ID stuff for Studio, yet you can still use UIA with Studio because it can evaluate things even if someone doesn't customize it. But for a lot of the more advanced tools, the developers, which we actually have a friend who developed the UIA technology for her company's products. And so we want to plan a talk with her to talk about the thought process and what you go back and fill and, what's most likely something, what do they care about? Because if we can understand what they're likely to use, that'll help us understand what we should be looking for on average, right? But it was a really interesting discovery of not all programs are the same and how they're built, right, with that UIA approach.
That's for sure. And not everybody takes the time to build even a UIA interface, because you have to understand that the UIA interface is meant for automation, for accessibility things. Like, for example, for blind people or for, hearing impaired, you have ways to automate parts of the GUI so that you could either read the text to a blind person or, interact for somebody who has motion impairment. But not everybody builds their program with accessibility in mind, so they probably don't do that. Now, newer tools for creating programs, like say, for example, if you're programming in .NET, whenever you create a control, it automatically builds a lot of UIA stuff for you that you don't even have to think about it, because the standard now is that most of the programs should have accessibility controls.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time.
For a long time. So I would expect most of the programs to have some way for us to interact programmatically with them, but you cannot assume that.
Speaking of which, so it's actually very ironic. The guy that we were helping, because he was trying to use UIA, was in fact like legally blind, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't using the UIA because he's legally blind. He's using UIA because he's programming stuff for his work to help other people be more efficient, right? So if you've like,
So
it's
funny.
humbling to realize here's a blind guy that's making tools with AutoHotkey to simplify work for other people.
Other people
Yeah,
who
it was
might not be blind
right.
themselves. Yeah, and I was like, shouldn't it be the other way around? Like they should be creating tools to
Right.
help the blind guy, right? But it was the other way around.
But it was really inspiring to be talking to him, and it was really fun. You know, it was a fun.
Yeah, it was a very fun call.
Is there anything else anyone's working on, or when we can keep on UIA, or maybe do a mini example with some other less dense. The other really tough part about UIA and quote unquote teaching it is every program's different, right? So depending on the task you're trying to do in every program, it's kind of like the whole API and website, you know, web scraping. It depends on what you're trying to tackle. So
right,
we'd have to run through 20 examples to really teach a concept. So you get the different approaches that you might need to take.
Okay, so on the chat here, Anthony asked, he made a very good question, like what is the relationship between Windows-based program UIA and web accessibility? And those are two different beasts, but with now Edge and Chrome building certain things, they're merging a little bit more because now the UIA interface is connecting to the web control and accessing the web accessibility that is available there too. So they're kind of merging. I cannot say they're the same thing at the moment, but UIA can access accessibility insights from a browser, is getting better at it. Because I don't remember if the ACC library before could access, I think it did, access individual elements on a web page. The ACC library, right?
Yeah.
So since a long time, they have this merge, but they're not the same thing anyways. Whenever you're creating a web page, you create your accessibility things, but that doesn't mean that UIA will be able to access it exactly how you built it. It does in its own way.
So we got another question. I put it in Telegram for you, Zaz. If you can just see it. It's a Night Phantom wants to spam a key within a certain time window,
right?
But hit it as much as possible.
So somebody's trying to spam a key, right? So let's say, I think we have videos that deal with loops and stuff like that. I do not want to start creating like examples for that right now because it might be a little bit more complex depending on what you want to do. But the idea that I could actually convey is two things. First of all, you need a loop. Just use the loop command to use the send command and send a key, for example. And then, by the way, if you're using a hotkey to start or stop the loop, then you would need to have the max threads per hotkey. That is a setting, a directive that is used in AutoHotkey to let it know that a hotkey can be launched twice. So those are the two things. You have a video on that, which you can link. Instead of us going through the whole process of how to create that, I think it's better if you can just watch the video because it's just a loop with the send command. I think there was another question here or a comment saying that web accessibility requires the use of special HTML tags and attributes and patterns of code, which is correct. So, and that's the question that I have. I don't know if UIA sees those tags and says, oh, they're accessibility, let me read them. I don't think that's what it's doing. It's doing something a little bit different. So as I mentioned, there are two different branches of the same concept. they are not really working together. Like UIA cannot see the accessibility tags, but UIA connects to the controls in the web page in a way that you can interact with them using the UIA control as well. By the way, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. Just coming back to what Knight was asking, there is something that I discovered recently. Well, not discovered, I knew it there, but I always forget. So let me go ahead and mention that for you guys. In case you are dealing with AutoHotkey version 1 and you're using loops, there is something that you have to keep in mind. If you use a loop for whatever thing that you're doing, like this, in AutoHotkey version 1, there is a delay for each action automatically for 10 milliseconds, okay? That is a delay that is there whether you want it or not. It is there by default. And it is not usually noticeable if you're doing a script that does a few steps. When you're gonna notice it when you have a loop, especially if your loop is, 40,000, is gonna be looping 40,000 times, which is what we were dealing with. We had, I don't know if I could share this tool about, yeah, so the idea was, it was a, let me go ahead and open it, autocomplete filter, basically. This particular tool, if I launch it, what did I set as the hotkey for that? Let me double check on that. I think I changed the hotkey to Windows Alt Control Shift. What? I think he changed the program a little bit. So let me see if I can revert back.
Well, let's, what, let's not.
But the idea was, what I wanted to do was actually load the thing, show the GUI, and
right, but I'd rather not show the content of a file that we don't know what's actually there.
Right. So in general, what it did was that we had a list view that had 50,000 terms, and then you could type on the list on a little filter that we had, and it would go through the whole list, and it is looping through it and just showing you the ones that match whatever you're filtering.
Why don't you start our hotkey string tool? Because even though we didn't come to the same solution, we use the same general approach, right?
Yeah.
Granted, we didn't have 40,000 items in the list, but
yeah.
my spell check does have like 4,000. And if we change the approach, maybe, maybe I would leave that on.
So this particular thing here, I have a filter up here, and it's going to filter this list based on whatever I type. Now, at this point, I only have like 62 hot strings and 9 hotkeys, so that's not a big number. We were doing something similar, but with a 50,000 line of text. Now, as this is a very small file, just doing the search is almost instantaneous. You don't feel it. When you have a 40,000 line thing, it takes a while for it to loop. So for every keystroke that I was making, it was trying to do 40,000, a loop of 40,000. And if you are using V1, you have a slip in there of 10 milliseconds that will make that really slow. So using the set batch lines to -1 on the script is not really just something nice to have, is needed. You have to use the set batch lines -1 whenever you're using loops in your V1 script, because if you don't, the loops are going to be slower than you might expect. And as soon as you're dealing with thousands of lines, the loop actually gets, you really feel the impact of it.
I think it's truthful to say both you and I, math isn't our strongest, doing actual math, right? However, if we just simply say with your logic of there's a natural 10 milliseconds per thing, and we had 40,000 lines, we just
Right,
add a decimal.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. You just put a zero there.
So it's
That is
400,000,
400,000, and
which is how many seconds?
right. So I just have to, well, tell this. How much is in seconds? How many milliseconds in seconds? Oh, right. I have to refresh.
You know, one of the other things which we'll throw out, by the way, that we learned during the week, it was really disheartening. So
400 seconds. How many minutes is that? Convert that to minutes. 6 minutes it would take for it to go through 400,000 lines. So just 40,000 lines. So it would take about 6 minutes for it to just loop through it.
It sleeps. It's
It
just
sleeps.
that's
It's
not
just
even
sleep.
the
That's
actual
not
program.
that, yeah, that's not even
And that's
working
why
with the
it
data.
sped up so much when we got rid of that. Well,
Definitely.
incidentally, while we're on ChatGPT, this is a really aha, because we were so bummed too with that, because we've written API calls to interact with the ChatGPT, not use the browser, but use their API. For whatever reason, right now in the API calls, it doesn't remember the history of what you asked before. Right. And we were like, well, crap, that's a huge part of the value. So
Right.
we were very bummed on that one.
Right. You see here that I said convert that to minutes. It knows that I'm referring to that other
Yeah, good
thing,
point.
right? So the fact is that if you're using the API, you manually have to do that.
Right.
For example, every time you pass,
It's not a conversation.
right? Every time you pass a request, you have to pass the context.
It's GPT with Alzheimer.
Definitely. But yeah, basically this little thing is insane in the sense of how it knows what I'm referring to, and is good. Like it makes it feel like you're having a conversation with somebody because it remembers more or less what is going on.
It saves you a lot of time. Absolutely.
But the API does not have that built in. It's not automatic. You have to do it yourself. Now,
So
yeah.
Did you see the chat? I see we got another question.
Yeah, I saw what Anthony was asking about. So Anthony was actually talking about the command line interface. They are very long and complex. I'm not sure what you mean by very long and complex. Do you mean like it has a lot of commands? And then do you have a way to use as a cheat sheet or an actual CLI builder? I think that is a completely complex question.
Well, the first thing I would say is isn't it Lexicos's thing that he built for interacting with the command prompt?
I was just about to talk about, Lexicos might give you a very good answer on that because he has been working on something very similar to that. So go ahead, Anthony. I saw that you unmuted. Probably.
I mean, is my audio okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes, this time
Okay.
I can hear you well.
Thank you so much for addressing the question. I really appreciate it. I know it's like the holidays and stuff, but yeah, sometimes you want to do something in PowerShell or like even Windows subsystems for Linux, and you want to run some really terse, illegible, Linux command. It's got a lot of options, and I'm just curious: is there any AHK solution that can either bring up a cheat sheet that's better than a man page, that's better than DLR, or better yet, even if it could like show you the options and build the command line query that you need and just copy it to the clipboard so you can just paste it into Windows Terminal.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. This is where Joe is going to say he loves the format command. But here's the thing. No, but here's the thing. Basically, as of yet, I do not know of any AutoHotkey tools that do exactly what you're asking for. But say this, for example, and this is something that you can build in a few seconds. Like let's say that you find a command online that has a lot of options. FFmpeg, for example, FFmpeg, which has the V command that does one thing, you know, open the file, MKV, and then the audio thing is 400 kilohertz, and
Your
then
input.
you have another input file, which is the file path, and then the output file, which is, so you have exactly what you're describing, like a command that has a bunch of parameters, and you're like, holy crap, what can I do for this? What I would do is just grab the command exactly as they give it on the web. Let's say you put a CMD or command, however you want to call it, make it a variable. And every location that is variable that can change, just replace it with a number like this. 2, number 3, and number 4. And then you can just use the format command, pass it the command here. And now each of the parameters, everything you put on the parameters separated by comma is going to be replaced on that string exactly as you put it. So you can say video video.mkv. The second one would be audio. So 400 kilohertz. The input file will be the path to the file, and the output would be file.out. Notice how I'm just using, I'm creating basically kind of like a function that would just grab that, and I run it, and I would get the correct command. Everything has been replaced with what I passed, and now I just have to change this one out to NKV. And now my command will have that. So basically what I would do is build a GUI with the commands that I want, have a template string like this, and then map the GUI variables to where they go in this command.
Let's continue, Isaias, because I think it's a really interesting general topic overall, right? Because my first thought is, well, I get what you're doing. I may not always, I know from using FFmpeg a lot in this example, you don't always use all the parameters, right?
That's correct.
And with this approach, that would end up breaking, right? Because, I didn't give it a 3. So would you consider bringing the beginning part of the parameter in with what you're doing, and then
the one, so in the yes, I could definitely do that, but I think there is a way for how do I say?
You know what it reminds me of? It's the same thing, right? Is the key value pairs in the URL, right?
Yeah, definitely.
When
It's basically what you're doing.
Right.
If you want some parameters to be optional, that makes it a little bit more complex, but it's doable, right? So, and I could say, if I pass an option here, then put it. If not, don't put it.
Right.
Which is something that we have done with the pretty links. So if you have a checkbox selected, it uses the format function to add the pretty link information. If that checkbox is not selected, then I don't put it, which is kind of like an optional thing. Let me show it. I think we had this pretty links thing in the tool. Here's the part that I did exactly what you asked for. So if I have the wrapper on, I put the HTTPS in the format function. If not, I make it blank, which is kind of like the optional part of your command. Instead of HTTPS would be the V with the variable that contains the option, right? So that would put the V in it and just put it into the format. So I'm using my template normally, but this whole section now is optional, including the parameter that you were referring to. So of course it is doable. It's a little bit more complex because now I have to check whether the option was set or not, if it has some options into it. But as a good start, if there is a command that you use very often, but the only thing that changes are some of the parameters, This is
Right.
extremely simple to do, and that returns the string that you can use with the run command or the comspec or whatever you do, comspec, and
It-
pass that to it.
So that's also, which maybe you can find it so we can share the link real quickly, because I don't think we've actually done a video on it, but there's a library from, I think, Lexicos on using ComSpec, and it allows you to much easier interact with it and see what was done and change some of the stuff.
Actually, you did one. We did one.
Well, we never published it.
Okay.
But
So-
we were borrowing something from Lexicos, and the point being, it made it much easier to, instead of turning on because you still, what was it that it did? Oh, it allowed you to do UTF-8 and something else that I
Mhm.
really liked about it. Oh, I think that is the one that I was thinking of.
CLR or
I
CLI?
think so. No, I think CLR. I think that was.
It loads the common language runtime, but that's not really, this is something else. This is for .NET. So
Oh,
this
all right,
thing
it's not that.
loads
Sorry.
something else,
Yep.
but probably there is another.
I can go look, because it was actually around FFmpeg that I was using it.
Mhm.
Because I have some FFmpeg that'll, rip out the audio from a video, and then I have others for combining videos, and it's just like you said, Anthony, the parameters get so crazy and it gets very confusing.
Right. Notice for this, the CLI Swiss Army knife created by the archive, it grabs the command line output and is putting it into a GUI, which is extremely useful in certain situations. But I'm not really sure if this is the one that you were looking for.
No, that's not. That one I believe we used actually on the FFmpeg to show us the progress we are
Yes.
on the video with FFmpeg.
Exactly.
So it's reading it, yeah.
Right. But I cannot really answer your question at this time, Anthony, because I do not know exactly if there is a tool that would do that. But in general, that is the solution that I would come up with. I would create a GUI with the options, and I put my options and hit OK, and that would return a string that already has the command line written for me, how it's supposed to. I just go ahead and paste it somewhere else. So it's kind of like
or we just ask ChatGPT to do it.
create one for me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Well, like as a follow-up, how about just general cheat sheet support? Like, for example, each program on Windows has its own potentially native hotkeys. And so is there an AHK script that can just generally display that kind of cheat sheet information for any program?
That is a very good question. Joe has been talking about that for years, I think.
Yeah.
I think when we started talking, you were talking about creating a script that would do that. But
Isaias, can you pull up the menu? Because some of those, it won't work for all, right? But some of those that are listed in the menu,
right.
the tool that we use that
Yeah.
will show you the menus, the one we just worked on the other day to say, let's bring this out in its own little thing.
Yeah. Go ahead and
we could probably take something like that and say loop across all the menus, and when you see a hotkey, extract that and build it into a tool that we could easily
that's a good
have on a cheat sheet or whatever.
right.
Are all the programs hotkeys in the menu, or could they be some hidden ones that are not on the menu?
Yeah, absolutely. Guy, that's my point, right? It's not
a main, how do I say, like a
perfect.
You'll get most of them, but something like Photoshop, you stand no chance.
right. Let me try. I think
There is a tool that can
have
detect
hotkeys
hotkeys that are mapped though, right? But it doesn't necessarily tell you. Remember, as we found one that shows you all the hotkeys that are tied to something, but it doesn't tell you what they do or anything. It just says this is bound to something.
Right. So this tool in particular, you point into a window and it gives you all the menu items that it has, right? which by the way, I don't know why they don't use a tree view for this, but yeah.
Right.
Oh, is it a tree view? It looks like a tree view.
I think
Just
that's
don't-
space indented.
Maybe. But the point is, he created kind of like a tree view, and you could see if they have some, if the menu itself, which is what I did, have the hotkeys listed there, this could give you a very quick overview of all the hotkeys of a program, right? That's one way of looking at it. Now, that might not work for everything though. So if I take the Explorer window, for example, and I try to, let me close this, and this is the ribbon. If I try to get, well, that doesn't even have a menu.
Right.
How about this guy? Doesn't have a menu. And,
Yeah.
and that's basically my whole point. It's not a method that would help you out in certain situations. So
UIA might be able to peek into some of those, and you could write a whole different program for
Right.
the, yeah.
here we go. So Notepad also has the keyword listed. Now, it is interesting that it's putting it onto the keyboard. I think it is because you're using the tab to put that there. But if it had a tab and had some name, for example, a hot string, it would show up as a keyboard, but it's not a keyboard thing because it's just whatever you put there. We usually label the hotkeys there, but it's not required for the programmer to do that. So
I remember when you first showed me how to do that right aligned, the left and right aligned, and I'm like, what? And you're like, yeah, it's not documented like anywhere.
Right.
It's just a little trick you learn. And I'm like,
Yeah,
we
that's
did
a
a video
very
on that.
weird thing.
yeah,
But in general, I think that is a starting point for several programs. Let me try something like, hey, DaVinci Resolve, or
well, DaVinci will launch at the next meeting, as is.
yeah. But I think
Did you
Any-
upgrade to 18? I thought you couldn't run 18.
no, I actually was able to get a
awesome.
graphic. Well, I got a graphics card.
Oh, okay, cool.
Right, and now I
Paying
was
you
able
too
to do it. No, actually, it was a gift. So yeah.
Nice.
Here we go. I do have a menu on this program here at the top. But
But you don't.
dragging it, yeah, it's not detecting it. So yeah, that's
Not
the problem with this type of programs, that you might
No.
have a normal menu, but you might not have it.
Isaiah, here, because I just don't know enough about this kind of stuff. If I remember right, DaVinci Resolve is probably 64-bit. Is that right?
Yes.
The tool you just used, isn't that looking for 32-bit menu, like interface?
Not
necess-
exactly, not
Okay.
necessarily. I think the problem with that is that
It truly is
DaVinci-
using a
the
different.
DaVinci Resolve is not using the Windows
look-
management
yeah.
system. It is using Qt Windows, which
Okay.
is something that is used for
Different
creating
controls.
programs. No, but it is created for it to work in Linux and Windows. So it's a unified Windows system that probably the menu, they're showing it as a menu. It looks like a menu, but it's not like a Windows menu. And that's the reason why this thing is not finding it. Here at the top, you can see that it says Qt5152, Q window icon. You see, so it is a very special window that might look like a normal window, but it's not, something different. So yeah, I hope that answers mainly your question. In general, there is no actual tool that does that. We have been thinking about it, and few people have asked about it. So maybe we should at some point take a little time for that. But the idea is we would have to read into the program different ways. And if there is no way to read it, then we would have to read a PDF file that they might have as a cheat sheet. That's
Hey,
what
if you're handing out cash, I'll take some. We got 4 minutes. So also, if you guys don't have plans for New Year's, we'll be streaming live here. Or for $7, you can join the Zoom call. But it should be a lot of fun. We got 4 more minutes while we're here. Is there?
Yeah, one other question, just as a follow-up, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like how does AHK fit in the whole world of just Windows program development? Because it seems like it's hitting some underlying or like some like secret APIs like down under the hood of Windows. I mean, is it like any program that a person builds with like visual, C plus, I mean C# is just going to be so much faster and AHK is going to be so much slower, but like how does it fit in the whole cosmology of Windows programming in general?
Right. I will give you a very short answer because we don't have much time, but anything there's two types of programming languages. You have what is called a static, oh, wow, I forgot the name. Well, the point is that the variables, you tell them what type of variable it is. Like, for example, statically typed language, like C++, that whenever you refer to a variable, you have to say whether it's an integer, if it is a string. So you already tell the computer what that variable is. Versus a scripting language like AutoHotkey that decides whether that variable is a string or a number based on the contents of it. When you have that just that one little detail makes AutoHotkey slower in processing, because every time you access a variable, it has to first determine what type of variable it is before it looks for or sets the information in memory. In a normal language, statically typed language, the computer doesn't have to check for that because you already told it what it was. So it is extremely faster in the sense of it doesn't have to make that decision. Beside that, you could do anything that a normal programming language can do with a scripting language. It just depends. And usually in a scripting language, what you gain is that it is easier to learn, easier to make a program, quicker for you to relaunch your program because you do not have to compile it. You just double click and it runs. On this statically typed programming languages, you have to compile it, which means converting all your text into machine code before running it, which is why you cannot just make a little change and let's run my program again. You have to compile it again. So it has its pros and cons. Usually for what we are doing, automation, quick tasks, automation of GUIs and stuff like that, a scripting language is good, even though it's slower. But for other tasks, it would be really better just to go ahead and use a normal language like C++ or anything that is intermediate like C#, because in the end, it has better performance. That's all.
Well, but it gets back to what the goals are and how often it's going to be used, how many times it's going to be run, right? Well, AutoHotkey is, for the most part, wrapping API calls behind the scenes that Windows has, right?
Yeah.
And to Zeus's point is like, if it's something that's going to be run on billions of things, you don't want it being interpreted over and over a billion times. You want to interpret it to machine code once. So then when it's run, there's no translation, right? It's done automatically and fast. We're unfortunately out of time. Anthony asked about that menu tool, Zeus, is that?
Yeah, that is actually the WinSpy tool.
From Alchemist.
Right. So this was, let me see if I have a link to it very quickly. Oh.
Anthony, if you want to write me an email, I'll send you the link.
Right.
Because we got to jump to the other call. But thank you, everyone. Have a great New Year's. If we don't see you, consider dropping in tomorrow night or whatever, if you're around. But thank you all.
Feliz Año Nuevo y Prospero.
Prospero año, yeah, that's right.